this whole thing together when I was emailing you is I don't think people realize how much sales goes on in the entire world around us. And a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm going to start a flower store. Well, how are you going to get people to come? You need to sell them. Oh, I want to be a lawyer. Well, people aren't going to walk into your door at the very beginning when you put your first sign up. You need to sell them. And automotive, I mean, really any industry, right? Is there an industry that doesn't require sales? Maybe if you're a teacher, you have the kids coming to you.
I would say maybe not necessarily active sales. There's e-commerce.
Sure.
But even then, on some level, somebody's talking about it. But that would be the only place. But it's funny. I ask a lot of, most people don't plan to be in sales. I didn't certainly plan to be in sales.
Right.
But when they did know they were going to be in sales, I always ask them what their parents did. And 9 times out of 10, one of the parents was a salesperson.
Okay.
When the kid knew he would be a salesperson. But sometimes I'll ask somebody that, and they go, my mom stayed home, and my dad was just a business owner. I'm like, hello, he sold. And they go, really? I go, yeah.
Yeah.
If he was a business owner, how did he have stuff to work on? So I think sometimes people forget that when you're a business owner, you're going to have to sell something.
And one of the reasons that I find that Sandler sales, the sales that you teach specifically, is very interesting is because, and it says it in the first chapter, if you were to, what's that, it's in the book, but what do they say? What's that old game show where you list Password, an old game show, you list adjectives and people try to guess what you're describing. And every negative, snake oil, crony, pushy, aggressive, sleazy, and then that usually can come to say, you would guess salesman.
Right.
But what's really unique about the Sandler system is that you kind of flip that all upside down and you just, blow right past that. And if the sale's going to happen, it works. And if not, but kind of describe for me, if you will, how the whole Sandler sales, and just so people know, it's based off this book, Dave Sandler.
You can't teach a kid.
Yeah, can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar.
Yeah. So in other words, the part of that is you can't just read a book about riding a bike. You've got to actually, work on it. And so the same thing is with sales. A lot of people just think they can just learn sales by reading a book. But the reality is, is that you need some reinforcement for that. But to your point there, in a court of law, you are innocent until proven guilty. As a salesperson, you're guilty until proven innocent. We've all had that person that wouldn't take no for an answer. It was pushy, and some of those things you described. And so when you darken a doorway, or someone darkens your doorway looking for something, they kind of assume you're that until you prove them otherwise. So all we're doing is just recognizing that and trying to break those patterns. And a pattern would be when you walk into a department store and the person there says, can I help you? And what's the typical response?
I'm okay. I'm just browsing.
Yep. Or I'm just looking or whatever. So those are patterns, and those patterns aren't helping anybody.
Right.
So what we're saying is let's break those patterns and let's ask a better question instead of getting an answer that we don't like but we continue to get.
And the background for those who aren't really sure, if you read the book, David Sandler lays out kind of where he was at in his sales career, and basically he was doing all the stereotype of what salesmen do, knocking doors, getting told no, getting told maybe, send me something in the mail, or I'm not really interested. And then it kind of clicked where he just, how would you describe? Because basically what he did was he just basically said up front, this is kind of what I'm doing. This is how I think. Do you have a minute? Let me talk to you about this. And if there's at any point it's not working, just let me know and I'm out of here.
Yeah, so
and basically just cutting all the pressure and all the nonsense out of what could be considered a sale.
Right. So the pattern interrupt there was that he says, I can handle no. What I can't handle is you just stringing me along.
Right. And did you use the term pattern interrupt?
Pattern interrupt.
Okay, so I want you to expand on that in a moment as well.
Yeah, you bet. So he's breaking the pattern of back to, when you walk into a department store, they say, can I help you? And you say, no, I'm just looking. Because that's a pattern. So we're going to interrupt that pattern. So what he did was most salespeople most salespeople don't want to hear no. So because they don't want to hear no and the prospect picks up on that, they tell you they just want to think it over or call me back, and you get all the put-offs. And so what salespeople don't realize is that they're contributing to an answer they don't want. Same thing as, can I help you? And the answer is no, I'm just looking. Well, they're not just looking. They're here. They're here for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he was doing, is just being disarmingly honest with his prospects, and he found that his sales changed once he started doing that. And he went from being the last on the list to one of the top on the list.
And how do you feel that with that whole pattern interrupt? How do you think that, clearly, because you're very experienced in the whole ecosystem, if you will, of sales, how did that actually change on the buyer side or the prospect side to give him the chance to listen and
so
hear
the
him?
buyer feels pressure when they don't think you can accept no.
Mm-hmm.
Because then that means the only thing you can accept is what?
A yes. Especially if they don't want it.
That means that might make you feel better, but as the prospect, that makes me feel like I have no options.
Mm-hmm.
So by just being able to say, hey, don't worry about yes or no right now, let's just have a conversation. And if I'm not pushing for yes, they can just relax and just listen and communicate and not worry about how they're going to squirm out of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the psychology.
And so how you and I got introduced is we have a mutual friend. And when I stopped by your office to support him on that one day that I came out to see everything, you pulled that off so well. You pulled off the whole changing of the expectations, or the I forget the term, the pattern interrupt. The pattern interrupt. And I already knew what to expect going in because I had read the book and I kind of understood the process and all the system. But I was shocked because I go in, you have the common pleasantries of, hey, how you doing? Good morning. Who are you? That kind of good stuff. And then we sat down, and right from probably the first 2 or 3 sentences, immediately I felt like I knew I was walking. And again, put myself as the prospect in that instance. I walked in knowing I was walking into the lion's den, if you will. And then within the first 2 or 3 sentences of you talking to us, immediately my reservations were lowered, my guard was lowered, and I thought, okay, why not? Whatever, let's hear it out. Let's hear it. And then, clearly, if you will, can you go through that process of what we talked about there?
A couple things.
Because by the end, I was just said, okay, you know what? I wanted to buy, even though I didn't necessarily need to buy, I was really surprised when I left. I thought this deserves a closer look.
Yeah. So basically, what you came to was the buyer-seller dance, and it's talking about how the prospect typically buys, how traditional sales is typically done, and then we just rolled into the Sandler system, and so that you could just easily compare and contrast. So there were several psychological triggers before you even got there. And I know you kind of feel like this is a big Jedi mind trick, but it wasn't to hurt you, it was to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for you to be able to disqualify or qualify us quickly, and vice versa. Because when things are unclear, then we tend to keep calling, and you keep leaving a voice message back, or you ignore me, and it's like, what's this all about?
Right, in the book, they say the sale was over a long time ago,
right.
But you didn't know that.
Yeah, so usually the salesperson is the only one that doesn't know that, because we just keep hoping and expecting it to change. So the first thing that you got to do, well, first of all, you filled out what was important to you before you got there.
Right.
And it was just a list of about 15 things. And Ryan was able to prioritize what he was interested in. Then we had everybody introduce themselves and share what those things were. And so that allowed you to participate right away. And you got to hear others participate. So it wasn't me talking, it was you guys talking. And then we rolled into that, hey, this program is not for everybody. And so I'm just going to kind of model something, and then that way you can see what it feels like. But this is also something that we train on, and that is some of you are going to know, about 10 minutes or maybe before we're done, that you do not want to know more about this program. You're glad you came. You met some good people. You might have had a little breakfast or something, but you do not want us to call you. So then all you need to do is just on this little sheet of paper, you just mark no. And you can do it, confidentially. You don't have to raise your hand. I'm marking no. Who's marking yes? Just do it confidentially, fold it in half, and we won't contact you. On the other hand, if you do want us to contact you, you need to mark yes. And that means we're going to contact you, and that means if you're not there, you're going to call us back, or you're going to take our call, and you're going to ask me questions, I'm going to ask you questions. It still might end up being no, but we're going to take it a step further. So that was the upfront contract. And that's what I executed. So then doing that early on, then when we got towards the end, then I reminded everybody, this is where you put no or you put yes. But it wasn't like it was a surprise. They already knew about it, and then, like you said, you felt more comfortable just listening because you knew you could get out of this.
Yeah, right. I mean, it seems like when you aren't doing that, sometimes you might always have in the back of your mind, oh, when's he going to pounce? When's he going to pounce on me and say, give me the sale, that type of thing. But you're right. That upfront contract, as they call it, was very reassuring, very calming, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you're trying to think of, what am I going to disagree with so that he's not surprised when I say no?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you're not even listening anymore. You're thinking about how you're going to get out of it. You're not even taking in what you see what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So the same thing can be done on a sales call, so that we can be, again, disarmingly honest. I want people to be disarmingly honest with me.
When you say sales call, so are you talking, sales call, clearly. What other mediums does the Sandler sales system work with? Seminars, I imagine. If somebody needs to do a seminar.
Any phone work you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
One of our call scripts is, hey, how about I take a couple minutes to share with you who I am, why I'm calling, and you can decide if you want to continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There you got an out again. Or it could be the first appointment, the subsequent appointments. It could be, just anything.
Yeah, so then would it be fair to assume there's really no medium that the sales system doesn't work on? As long as you're communicating. Yeah, as long as you're talking to the decision maker, there's really no reason not to.
Yeah, it wouldn't work with e-commerce because there's no dialogue.
Okay, right.
But anytime there's a dialogue.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. Have you heard of the guy Bill Good?
No, but I love the name. Better than Bill Bad.
Bill Good is a guy who is very similar to David Sandler. He wrote a book. He's written a couple, sales books, but he kind of coins himself and calls himself the reason the do not call list was invented. And back, his very similar story as David Sandler. Back in the 80s, he was doing, some sales, and he kind of found a system that worked really well for him. And then he went on selling those system, like the Sandler system.
Yeah.
But what he started doing was he started working with a lot of major financial groups, like the Merrill Lynch's and the Lehman Brothers groups and whatever major groups of the 90s were around. He had them, and similar to Sandler, where he had these guys. First off, you put a script down, because if you don't write a script, and this is something that Bill Good says, and I'm sure that Sandler would agree, is that if you don't have a script down, you're going to get a script whether you write one down or not, because after maybe say the 10th or 20th call, whether you have a script that you can monitor, like the scientific method where you test it, that's one route to actually do the script. If you do no script, then you're going to mentally just keep repeating the same thing. You might not realize it, but it's in your best interest. And then from there, his whole thing is very similar to Sandler, where it's as soon as someone says, I'm not interested, say, okay, thank you, have a good day, and go on to the next type of person. But I was curious if you were familiar with Bill Good.
No, I'm not. But you know what? There's a lot of folks, that's not a judgment towards him. It's
sure.
There's just a lot of different things out there. But what I like about what he's saying is, there's just some people that just don't qualify.
Right.
And sometimes when people say they're not interested, they may be, but if you've qualified them and they say that, then it shouldn't be a surprise to either one of you.
Well, Sandler says that all prospects lie, whether they know it or not. How do you explain that? It's more specifically.
Everybody lies.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just prospects, but we put prospects because that's primarily what we're talking about.
Sure.
But, it's biblical. It's even in the Bible that everybody lies.
Yeah.
So some people just go, they do. And I'm like,
you haven't?
So as a salesperson, if you don't think people lie, I'm telling you right now, that is not helping you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you take everything at face value, you're missing the mark. So that doesn't mean I'm expecting people to lie. I'm expecting them to tell me the truth. But I'm just prepared if they don't. And if I'm taking notes and things aren't adding up, now it could be that I misunderstood, because I do that.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that I have some lies in there. So all we want to do is just verify and try to find out. At the end of the day, what we're looking to do is get to the truth. And if the truth is that they don't value what we do, or they don't want to grow, or they don't want to get better, and there's a lot of people that fit into that category. I know that's shocking to people, but 80%, maybe 60% of the salespeople out there just want us just status quo, stay comfortable. They don't want to grow. So why would you spend time, money, and energy on something that you just want status quo? That's not going to happen.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that. I'm curious. With the number of people that join, join your company and get some consulting from you and your team, what would you say is like the success rate? Have you gotten it to a point where you can pretty much identify people's psychological weaknesses or so?
Well, we have a couple ways
and help these people to really break through that ceiling?
Yeah. So, couple things. One, really in general, there's only about 20% of the companies out there that are a potential fit for us, which means 80% aren't.
Okay.
So when we start working with somebody, our goal is to get out of the 80% of the people's way as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Because they don't really want it or need it, and it's not going to work anyway. So let's just not become part of the problem, and let's just get out of the way. The other 20%, then, that they're at least potentials, but that doesn't mean they're going to become our clients, because otherwise we'd be working with 20% of the companies out there.
Sure.
So one of the things we look at is we assess. Like if a company comes to me, I'm going to assess them, or an individual comes to me, we're going to assess them based on competencies and behaviors. And so a lot of people say, well, yeah, the reason you haven't taken assessment is because you just want to talk in the sales training. And it's like, no, it's actually the opposite. I'm assessing them to try to talk them out of sales training. Mm-hmm. Because if they're a zebra and they're trying to do giraffe work, they can throw money at training and Dan and coaching, and that neck's just never going to be long enough. Mm-hmm. So let's just make sure that it's even a good fit. Is there a return on investment? Is there some game there that if they spend $1 in an hour, are they going to get something back? Mm-hmm. And then the other part of it is that's more of the competencies and behaviors. But having said that, I've had some people that maybe don't have the best competencies, don't have the best behaviors, but they've got a big why. And so the why is the gap, WHY. So if someone is talented, competency and behavior-wise, but they don't have a why, that may not be a good fit.
So you mean somebody who's just out there to sell, just to sell, or selling just to make money?
I'm making $250. My wife works too. We're good.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
Their heart isn't in it.
Yeah. I would suggest just keep doing what you're doing, because anytime you change something, it's difficult. Mm-hmm. So why change something and make it difficult when you're happy where you are, right? So then the other side of that, though, is some people have a big why, not a lot of competencies and behaviors, but they can still get it done. Mm-hmm. So an example of that would be two kids grow up on a block. One kid's just naturally athletic, the other kid's not. But the one kid, he loves football. He's just not naturally gifted, but he loves football, and he wants to be a professional football player. He could potentially still be a professional football player, and the talented kid doesn't, because his why is so great, and he's going to outwork and outdo whatever. Mm-hmm. And then occasionally, and this is rare, you'll have someone who's athletic and has a big why. But that's a really, really small percentage of the population. That's in like the 1% range. Mm-hmm. And I've come across a couple of those folks, but that's out of a lot of people.
Well, so in the hundreds or even thousands of people who you've worked with over the years, what are some of the more common people who you see who just drop out? For somebody who might be listening who's like, I think I might do that. What are some of the more common character flaws or behavioral flaws that find people that fail?
They're kind of a big talker and not a big doer.
Okay.
They say all the right things. They sound like they're going to do the right things, but they're kind of all talk and no show. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like this. Oh yeah, man, you bet. I'll be in there once a week. Yeah, I can't wait to join. Yeah, I can't wait to participate. And then 2 weeks goes by. I haven't seen you. When you coming? Oh, I'll be there next week. And then they come once. And oh, this is great. Yeah, I'll be back. And then they don't show up again for 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, it's the beginning of the end. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't just write me a check and things magically happen. It's kind of like high school or college, for example. Just paying tuition doesn't mean you're going to graduate.
Because there's a lot of showing up in your office and being accountable for your work or lack thereof, right? It's not just. You don't just come in the evenings, do an hour-long note-taking session, and then go home.
Or just listen to some app or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to participate. Or the other part of it is they're not seeking me for coaching. I'm not the boss of them. I can't make you come in. Mm-hmm. You have unlimited coaching with me, but if it's been a month and you still haven't had anything you want to go over, like I'll call you and say, hey, we have, you've come to the sessions, but we haven't any coaching. What would you like to work on? I don't have anything right now. It's kind of like, oh, how do you not have anything?
Still.
So back to probably no gap, or maybe not a lot of initiative, or just comfortable. And so those are some of the things. And then the third thing would be that they don't want to be held accountable for things they do have control over. So when I talk to people, particularly like companies, I say, tell me a little bit about accountability, as it relates to your salespeople. Oh, they all have a number. Okay, so they need to make, okay, and so then tell me about that. Well, they have this number, and then I said, well, what happens when they don't make the number?
And we're talking about sales trainers here, right? Like
we're talking about VPs of sales.
Okay, yeah, the head of sales people.
We're talking about business owners. They go, and then, so that's an outcome accountability. But then, so that's a red flag. And then I'll say, well, what about just what they do day in and day out? Well, they're supposed to be on the phone. Sure, but how much? Well, it depends on the person. So how much? I don't know. Well, how can we hold someone accountable when we don't know? You see where I'm going?
So then they don't really have a system or any type of true figures in place to figure out how to make a sales team run properly.
Right, and they don't know what the individual, recipe is by individual. They just throw out generalities. So if I just do average numbers, what am I shooting for? Average. And then people don't even do that. So then they wonder.
And and I found that exact problem when I first started. Again, back to the whole thing. Nobody grows up wanting, I want to be a salesman when I grow up.
Yeah,
but
about 10% do.
But you realize, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but most don't.
But 99% who want to build their own thing realize it's necessary. And what I realized, once I realized, I don't know how to sell. I don't really even know what, and you start looking on the internet, you start getting books. And then the best analogy I could come up with when I was trying to describe that situation is, imagine if Christopher Columbus wanted to sail to the New World, or any of those people for that matter, the pilgrims. You don't just jump in a boat and go, all right, we're going to sail there. And then, nighttime, daytime, you arrive, you have to have a plan. I'm starting here, I'm trying to get to here.
They probably have some experience and been developed, and
you have to make sure you got the right crew. You got to know how to navigate the stars and the sun and the trade winds and all of that. There's a lot that goes into it, rather than just, we're just going to, whatever happens this month happens this month.
Yeah.
However our sales this month is how it is. I imagine a lot of people come in who don't have, who are like that,
really
just kind of
plan.
like going in a circle with their boat.
Yeah, one of the things David Sandler called it is hysterical activity on the way to the grave. It's just random, hysterical, just try this, what about that? I'm doing stuff, I'm working. But, when you're a commissioned salesperson, if you're not working effectively, we always say you are worth exactly what you're making if you're in commission sales. So if someone says, my gosh, I can't believe I'm only making $40,000. If you're in commission sales, that's what you're worth. Because now you could argue if they're in their first year or something, but what's nice about commission sales is you do get paid what you're worth. So if you are a $200,000 person, you will make $200,000.
Absolutely.
And no one can just pat you on the head and say you're only worth 50.
Yeah, because literally you just proved that you are worth whatever that number is.
Yeah.
What I imagine with all the different types of people come in, they have all the different mediums they're trying to sell on. What are some of the more unique tactics or sales stories you've come through? Because I know some people go door-to-door selling, phone call selling, seminar invite selling, every type of way to try to sell. What are some of the more unique ways you've seen people come up with and be successful at sales?
As far as building their business?
Right, building their business outside of just the number.
It's so unique. It's, we always say, whether it's Sandler, Dale Carnegie, Miller Hyman, or, Bill Good, there's a lot of good systems out there, and but the question is, are they proven? And I don't know about Bill, but the other ones I mentioned are proven. And so, but they're only proven if you follow them.
Sure.
Right. But so there's not, and the other thing is are we vastly different than those three? No. So someone says, well, why Sandler over Dale Carnegie and Miller Hyman then? Well, it's because the one that you use is the best one. So where I'm going with that is the best way to build business is through referral. It's just, there's just, now can you get creative in how you get referrals? You bet. But that is the percentages are way higher. And, and some people get referrals that don't ask. And that they always say, well, I'm already getting them now. And I just said, gosh, imagine if you asked. Sometimes people don't do what they're supposed to do because they're being rewarded for not doing it the right way.
So you say asking for referral. Just about 2 weeks ago, I was at a luncheon by a financial management firm that we do a lot of business with. They're awesome guys. They're really sharp, smart guys based out of Chicago. So the first, hour was going over economic stuff and going over, financial status stuff. And then the next 30 minutes or so, they brought in, they had their top producer consultant guy, who specifically only helps with the top producers that work with those guys. And he actually mentioned referrals, and he says, are you asking, who, show of hands, who asked for referrals, people put their hands up. He says, stop it today. He says, if you're doing it right, you should never ask for a referral. And he kind of laid out a way where one of his top producers was getting referrals like crazy, but he never was asking. So when you're talking about referrals,
I would say stop asking ineffectively.
Okay, yeah. So
I would not say stop asking.
Okay, so how would you build on that? And I'll give you an example, because he said that this guy, he would sit down with, mom and dad client or Joe Schmo client, whoever, and he would always have a story to tell about how he was helping out an existing client with something, and then that would spark in that person, that his client in front of him.
That's a third-party story.
The third-party story, and that guy would say, "Oh, I know somebody who could help you with that," and he knew enough about the client that he knew that story would trigger that thought. So when you're talking about referrals, what are some of your best tips for referrals?
So that can be one of them. Is just saying, hey, what's unique? Or I could say, what's unique about why you work well with us is because of this and this and this. Specifically saying why you're a good fit, and then asking around those things, because birds of a feather do flock together. Yeah, I would never advocate not asking, because why not do something that you have control over?
Yeah, true.
Right? So, sometimes people just take things too literal, and, he might be able to get away with that, but I don't think that's a leverageable and transferable skill that I would recommend for the masses. But another example could be, what happens, why people can't think, they want to help, but they just don't know how to help, is they can't think of anybody. So the third-party story is a way to help them think of somebody. Another thing that we have all of our clients do through a referral process is they come up with a referral sheet that allows someone who wants to help you 4 different ways to think of somebody. So it could be by your 30-second commercial. It could be by the certain size of companies or people you're looking for. It could be by niches that you have. These are the 6 top industries that we're currently working with. I didn't know if you knew anybody that was in commercial printing, or I didn't know if you knew of anybody that was in financial advisory services, or an insurance person. Because what that does is it helps go from vague to specific. And then the last part is just the third-party stories. Those are the 4.
So instead of just directly asking for a referral, paint a picture for the person so they can kind of paint an idea of who they know in their social circles that fit exactly those parameters you're describing.
Yeah. Like they'll just say, well, who do you know? Who else do you know that I could help? That's way too vague. That's not helping your client or prospect think of anybody. So if I give vague out, I get vague back.
That's
the
a good
vague
point.
back is, I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you're like, how can you not think of anybody? You know 100 people. Well, it's not his fault. It's the way I asked the question.
That's a very good point. That's a very good way to put that.
So then the other thing that can help us, in terms of social media, is being able to, with like LinkedIn, for example, we do a lot of training around sorting the connections of people who say they want to help you. So if you say, Dan, I really want to help you, but I'm not quite sure. So I tell you what, I'll look over your LinkedIn connections, and I'll come up with 5 to 7 names. And then you tell me if there's one of those that you think has some razzle dazzle, and then we'll figure out how to do that. But I'm doing all the heavy lifting for you, and I'm basically giving it to you on a platter. I'm just asking which one of these do you think, based on what you know about me and based on how well you know them, would be the most fertile ground. That's another way to do it. When you came to the session, and I don't get a referral from everybody, but I get a referral every time, is one of the things at the end is when you're hearing about this today, even though it's not for you, you might be thinking of someone who you do think it's for. And so just jot down their name, and if you have a name there, then even if you don't want to work with me, we'll talk about who you wrote down. And I can't tell you how many times people aren't willing to work with me themselves, but they give me a referral.
Okay.
So the idea is, well, if they're not working with me, they can't give me a referral. That's head trash.
So it'd be fair to say that referrals are the best way to grow your business, and very specifically how you ask, right? Like
it's
you said.
Easier, gentler way.
Okay. Wow. That makes so much sense. And I guess I just never actually thought of it, the way you're putting it. Mm-hmm. Referrals, clearly. But like you said,
so
vague in, vague
because
out.
most of the time people don't get referrals when they ask, which is, I kind of get what he's saying,
mm-hmm.
but he's taking something too far, and it's that's not the problem. The problem is they're not asking well.
Uh-huh.
So I would agree, don't ask, hey, who else do you know that I could help? I mean, is that better than nothing, modestly? But I would just come up with a better way of doing it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Back onto social media, how many years have you been doing the whole sales training now for?
So I'll be celebrating 12 years in September.
Okay, so in the last 12 years, how has social media really because internet and social media has transformed everything.
Yeah.
How have you seen, and I imagine, and just off the top of my head, as an example, if you have a small business that you're trying to bring more people in, Yelp.com is a huge referral source mm-hmm. to build that social proof.
Yeah.
So how have you seen, and how have you kind of incorporated into your training using social media, like LinkedIn? That was a great one.
Yeah.
What are some other examples?
So I think sometimes people try to do too much and then they never really do anything, so, and I'm going to just use as an example, but mm-hmm. I'm going to make this recommendation to anybody. I'm really, really good at 2 things and only about 3 things within those 2 things.
Okay.
So I'm not on every social media site, and I'm not on, in fact, I get things for Google Hangout and all that stuff, and I just can't do it because I know myself enough to know that I can be a member of all those things but not using it.
Yeah,
so
right.
Most of the people that are on LinkedIn are what I call passive users.
Okay.
And the same with Facebook. Now, and you could say, well, I post stuff all the time. That's passive. Passive is throwing something out there just hoping somebody looks at me. Active is actively calling or getting a referral to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So when you just post something, a blog or whatever, that's marketing. Nothing wrong with marketing. That is not sales. Sales is when they look your way, the minute you pick up the phone or you send a targeted email or you respond, the sales starts as soon as it gets active.
Mm-hmm.
So I use LinkedIn and Facebook. Those are the only 2 I use. If I were going to add one, I'd have to reduce one because I'm not going to be on every site and just hope things happen.
Yeah.
And I'm not against the other ones. It's just I feel like these are working for me. So, but the point of that is now, for example, particularly LinkedIn, if you're in business, I think you're missing out if you're not on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because the first thing, I don't even go to people's websites anymore. This is just me, because why would I go to the website when it's just there for the taking on LinkedIn? I can see who they are, where they've been, the company, and I see their resume and who they're connected to.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I go out to a website? I mean, that makes no sense. It's just all right there. I don't have to hunt and check. And even when I go, like, for example, if I looked at your company, you probably have your company listed there on LinkedIn, and it's easy to understand instead of going through the website and having 50 pages and it's all gobbledygook.
It's a good point.
It's outdated.
Yeah, a lot of people say a website is just a modern day, just a digital billboard. A lot of people are not active in keeping their website engaging.
They're
if
usually
you will.
outdated.
Yeah, very much so. Absolutely.
So LinkedIn is typically updated.
Mm-hmm.
It gets updated as soon as someone quits a job. They update it right away.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is I personally, sorry to all the list people out there, but I don't know why you would buy a list if you're on LinkedIn.
Okay. So when you
Unless
say buy
you're doing business to consumer, maybe.
So yeah, when you say buy a list, you mean like a list of leads. Yeah, and I don't really know. I've done that once before, many years ago, and again, like with do not call lists.
Yeah. And
with other caller ID, people using their cell phones, that kind of stuff. The lists are not quality. Maybe not like they were in the 80s.
They're outdated immediately, and on some level, so is LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
But it's less outdated.
Okay.
And it's constantly being updated. And here's the other big thing: it's free.
Yeah, it's free. Just give them your email.
Yeah.
So how do you prospect on LinkedIn without coming across as, because you've probably received these. Sometimes you get a message from someone who just straight off the I don't know this person, I don't recognize that name or that face, but the first thing they did was try to connect with me plus a message, and I can tell the sale is building already.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, maybe not. So the way I look at it is, and I ask people this: what marketing campaign or advertising campaign do you currently have that is generating 6 to 10 leads a month per person? Everybody goes, I don't have anything like that. Okay. Well, how many invites are you getting a month on LinkedIn? And even people that aren't that active will say 6 to 10. Okay. So the goal of marketing is to get people to look your way. And there's people looking your way, and I see this all the time, and salespeople are going, I don't know you, delete, delete, delete. Like, well, that's great you feel so good about yourself, but you probably had 2 good networking opportunities in there where you guys could be ambassadors for each other. You probably had maybe 2 potential clients in there, but you didn't know them, so are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone says, I want to meet you, and you go, I mean, where is that in sales school?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And I don't know where that comes from. So I get a minimum of 4 qualified phone appointments a month just from my LinkedIn invitations.
Okay.
And I usually have at least 3 meetings out of that.
Okay.
Because if they look interesting to me, then I'll say, hey, look, I appreciate you inviting me. Isn't that nice?
Mm-hmm.
Someone invites a salesperson to something. How often does that happen?
Yeah, right.
And then I said, besides linking in, it depends on, what do you think about grabbing coffee or scheduling a phone call so we can learn more about each other? And these are the responses I get. I would love that.
Okay. And especially because, the stereotype for a salesman or a sales trainer, again, we've already gone over this, everybody knows it, it's not a positive one.
Right.
And it's being a salesman teacher, people have to look at you like, come on, man, you're not helping anybody teaching salesmen to be more salesmen.
Right.
But clearly it's, you fought that stereotype and it's not happening. It's working.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason. A couple of times this happens, they go, I'm so sorry, it was an accident. Like, no worries. And I just remove them.
Okay.
Sometimes they go, it was an accident because there was this button and it sent out invites. It somehow looked at my, or I didn't mean to hit you and I did, or it somehow invited like 50 people and you were one of them. And even then, they go, but you know what? I wouldn't mind meeting with you. So even though there was an accident,
okay,
they're still willing to meet.
Mm-hmm.
But those are things that people are not thinking through because they see LinkedIn as a necessary evil or just a passive thing and not an active thing. And of course, the other way I use it is through the referrals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've gotten a lot of business by getting referrals the way that I just described to you. Someone says, Dan, I want to help you, and I give them a platter, and they go, oh, God, I would have never thought of him. And they go, yeah, I'll introduce you to him, and they become a client.
Wow. Okay.
But I vetted who those people were, and they're already linked into them, so I knew they knew them.
And that's
well, they don't necessarily know all of them, but out of 7, they'll know at least one of them.
And you bring that up, vetting people. That is a really good point. Let me see if I can find it right here, because there are the 5 steps to when you're talking to a prospect.
So qualifying.
Exactly. Can you go over, and I'm going to pull it up right here, because those are so important.
Yeah.
So much. And again, like I said, I can relate to what we're talking about here because I was in that very fresh green behind the ears where I was talking to, I'd call somebody and I would call them back for 4 months thinking something, but like we said, the sale was over months ago. I didn't know it.
And they may not have even qualified to begin with.
Absolutely. So, okay, here we go. So how do you go through those steps of qualifying in case somebody has no idea what they're doing?
Well, there's 3, first of all, when I go through LinkedIn to do that, I'm looking for a certain title, and I'm looking for a certain size, and I'm looking for people in the Kansas City area, and I'm looking at certain industries. Mm-hmm. So those are my 4 qualifiers. And the reason I do that is because, our qualifiers are paying budget decision. So I want to at least attempt to start out with the person who I believe can say yes. So I'm looking for owners and C-level people. And I'm able to sort by that through LinkedIn. So then that takes the number way down. And then the other thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for, if I'm looking for a company, I'm looking for someone who has at least 5 salespeople. In my mind, they have to have at least 20 people. So that's the other little vetting I look is, do they have the 20 to 50 and above, so I can click those things. And then certain industries, just, when I've got multiple clients in a certain industry, then why not look for others in that industry? Most of them I didn't pick. I did not pick the construction industry as I had this big plan. I can't wait to work with general contractors, electrical contractors, plumbers, all that. No game plan, but they picked me. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's obviously a niche, so now I'm targeting them. But I didn't plan to do that. I don't know how to make anything.
And so when you talk about, like, say, like general contractors, for example, so you get contacted with them, you get connected, and then maybe you spend, a month going back and forth, only to find out, oh, you know what, it didn't work out. Now, maybe a month isn't that bad, but how can someone who is totally new make sure that they're not, like, for my example, investment management. I don't want to, it does me no good to talk with somebody who maybe they got $5 million, but they have stipulations where they can't, it's got to be managed by this one firm that the family has chosen or something along those. Immediately, that would have disqualified that person from my funnel.
Right.
But if I were new to all of this, I probably would have just kept chasing them, not realizing that I need these bullet points. So I imagine a new person, and whether it's construction or a flower shop or investment or insurance or whatever, you need to bullet point out your
minimums.
Ideal,
I suppose. When you were first in the business, you might not have had a minimum. If they could fog a mirror and they talk to you, you talk to them. And that's not a bad thing, but that's kind of how it goes. But that doesn't mean it stays that way. So, for me, again, that they have 5 salespeople, then I'm looking for the companies that would be big enough to potentially have that. On an individual, I'm looking for somebody who's probably, at least 30, preferably 40, been selling for 10 or more years, and believes that they have at least a $35,000 gap in their personal income.
Okay.
That they believe if they were better they could make. So let me put that in context.
Sure.
So let's say they're making $120,000 and they're just kind of hitting their head against the wall going, there's no reason I can't be making 150, 170. I mean, I believe in my heart of hearts, but I'm working on it and it's not happening. Well, that's a $35,000 or more gap. If someone says, I'm making 40, I'd love to make 50, doesn't qualify.
Okay.
That doesn't qualify for what we're looking for. Now, there's people out there that can help them. It's just not us.
Right.
So you got to kind of know that about yourself. You know what's a good fit. And that way, when you're asking for things, being more specific. Even when I ask a referral, one of my referrals is, I'm really looking for, like a business owner or a peak performer within a large company. And they are sort of isolated. The business owner is isolated because he runs the company and people kind of tell him or her what he wants to hear, but they don't really. And a peak performer is isolated because everybody's got a target on his back.
Right.
And they don't share information with him and they're trying to knock him off. So, but what's interesting about that is if they have at least a $35,000, $40,000 gap, I'd like to talk to them.
Okay.
And they're probably between 35 and 55, been selling at least 10 years. And these are some industries that are good for that. So all of a sudden people start to see a face. So it's more about seeing a face than it is about asking for a referral. Because once they can see the face and they go, oh, who I just thought of? I wonder, do you know so-and-so? No, I don't. Tell me about them. But all of a sudden they thought of someone because I got really specific with you. And a lot of salespeople just say, everybody, we work with everybody, anybody. Well, that's not going to get your referral.
I can't agree with you enough. I've always said, if you are somebody for everyone, then you're nobody for anyone.
That's right.
Because the moment you start to, I've had this conversation with people in sales before, saying, look, I'm no sales expert. By no means am I a sales expert, but I can tell just from being a human being that let's say if I get in trouble for whatever happens and I need a lawyer. I don't want to go to a lawyer who does traffic tickets, who does small claims courts, who does accident injury, who does workers' comp, who does international defense. I want a lawyer who's very, very good at this one thing, this one need I have.
Right.
And so a lot of people, and maybe you could even say if I, build on that, is that a lot of people might be scared to really narrow themselves, and rather than just kind of buckshot everything, really zero in on their target. They might think, well, if I zero in, then there's so much opportunity I'm cutting out.
Right. Yeah, that's the myth is that, or the lie is that if I'm too specific, I'm limiting myself. The reality is when you're specific, you get more. When you're known for something and not known for everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at Lamborghini. Lamborghini is most certainly not for anyone, but they're doing pretty darn well. And in fact, they don't even put commercials on the television. They're so well. I've never seen an advertisement for Lamborghini.
And you don't see them that much, but I guarantee the guy that's selling Lamborghinis is making more than the guy selling Chevys.
Yeah. Okay, that actually tipped me off to another thing I wanted to ask you about, the psychology of sales. The psychology of sales is so primal because, as you know, if you can think 100,000 years ago, if you were the creative person, if you came up with an idea or tested something and the tribe said no and shunned you, you're dead. You're out of the tribe. And today it's still inside of our brain where I don't want to be that sales guy who's all pushy and sleazy, and then I'm told no and I'm looked down upon by the peers or community, and then I'm out on my own in the tribe. So when people are coming in, how do you break that psychology? Because you have to be, not only are you helping them with putting a system for sales and building a business, but I'm sure there's maybe 10% or whatever of what you do is being a therapist, almost a psychology expert.
Yeah, it's actually a little more than that, because what you've just touched on are what we call attitudes. And technique. Sandler is a method, and it has techniques. The techniques are the easiest part. What's more hard to change are attitudes. And so most people that are in sales have this idea that I need to sell the way I buy. But if I have non-supportive buying behaviors and I sell that way, then all of a sudden I'm taking a sales cycle that maybe was like this, but because I have non-supportive buying behaviors, and it's going to become like this.
Now, how do you describe non-supporting buying behaviors?
Like I need to always get 3 bids.
I see. Okay.
I need to do a lot of research before I buy things. I need to get as many bids as I can, because you never know.
And so what you're saying is that not all people buy or sell the same way that you personally do. So you need to be more fluid about working that.
Well, and you also want to be watching how you buy, because birds of a feather flock together.
Okay.
So if I have non-supportive buying behaviors, but I don't sell anything, that's not that big a deal.
Okay.
But if I have non-supportive buying behaviors and I am selling things, that's a big deal. Because now I am attracting other people who have non-supportive buying behaviors. So what we're looking for, people, having said that, I sell to people all the time that have that, but I sell to them differently than I do someone who has my buying behavior. So it's really the salesperson's responsibility to identify, how does this person buy? Not how do I sell, how do you buy? And then I adapt. But there's certain people I'm not willing to adapt to. And that's a disqualifier.
Okay.
Are you with me?
So you have to, on the outset, you need to figure out who are your buyers and their behaviors, what's acceptable for you. Yeah.
So dominant personalities and what I call influencers, salespeople are a lot of influencers. They are the quickest decision makers, and they buy stuff all the time and they love it.
I got to be honest, and I think it's even in this book, being a salesman, I'm the easiestly sold person ever. I've actually had buyer's remorse more often than I have, a couple of times where I've actually had to call up and be like, you know what, I got to cancel this. I didn't even want.
Caught in the emotion.
Yes. There was one time when sometimes you'll see like the inner city guys. I used to live in Brookside. Some of the kids from East of Truce would come over and sell magazines and stuff. And there were a couple of times when I didn't even want the magazine, but I was so easily sold. I was like, you guys, I got to be honest with you. That was a great sales pitch. You didn't put pressure on.
I'll buy the candy bar.
Yeah, right. and so I ended up buying like 3 magazines, and then I called and ended up canceling because I was like, I don't even want those. I kept one of them. One of them I actually genuinely, I think it was Popular Science. The other 2, I was like, I don't even want those. So yeah, I know what you mean. Salespeople.
So, and then you're going, well, no wonder you like this business so well, because you're selling to salespeople. Well, yeah, that is part of it. But the other part of it is The slower, people to make decisions are going to be people that are more steady and calm, and people that are very technical.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not saying I'm not willing to sell those people, but if sometimes with the technical person, they're always wanting me to prove why I should buy for them, and on some level, I'm just kind of like, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. Why? Because you want me to prove to you why you should buy it, and instead, I'd like you to prove to me why I should work with you, and you don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And and again, psychology. That's a completely reverse way when you first get into sales of thinking of that.
That's a pattern interrupt.
Exactly.
But I've learned that even if I can convince that person to come in, it doesn't work out well.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me a different posture with that person. Now, if I thought, if I just get them in here, it'll all work out. It doesn't. This isn't like push a button and voila, you're making more money. I've got to rely on them as much or more as they have to rely on me. And if I don't like what I'm hearing, it's probably not worth it, because we're both going to be working really, really hard, and neither one of us is going to like it. So how's that good?
Right.
Now, when I say something like that, if they come around with something that's articulate, makes sense, they change their posture a little bit, I'll listen. But if they're just like, hey, it's cool. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's all right. And we just move on. I'm going to extricate myself from not a good situation that would become a bad situation if we work together. I learned that lesson. I don't need to learn that again.
Do you feel like this whole topic of the psychology of how a sale could work or should work to benefit both people, do you find that that's one of the toughest hills for people who are coming into you to cross?
Depends on the person.
Okay.
Yeah, some people just love it. They geek out on it, and they're on it like flies on what. I mean, they just get it right away, and then there's others that's just kind of like, well, that's a little woo-woo. It is woo-woo. But woo-woo is understanding people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and so there's IQs, what's that stand for? Intelligent quotient.
Yeah.
But there's also EQ, and that's emotional quotient. And the smartest guy does not always win. I find too often a lot of these smart people just are so upset that they're not more successful, but their EQ is so low, and they think if I just know enough, people will buy from me. It's more than just knowing enough.
Actually, I am going to just shut up for about the next 10 minutes because I want you to definitely just like dish on how does EQ differ from IQ? Clearly, IQ is your knowledge, your smarts, your capabilities. The EQ is being able to sit here across the table from you and I and just feel, okay, I can feel right now that Dan is comfortable. Not necessarily like, his arms are crossed,
right.
He's defensive, or he's got beady eyes, he must be suspicious.
Right.
But there's something about, you and I have talked now, I think it's like 45 minutes or so we're in, and we can tell how the other one is feeling without really even describing it. So how, and again, this goes back to the psychology of where sales is coming from, to convince someone to part with their money with what you have.
Right.
How do you build that EQ? How do you recognize where your EQ is in the process of a sale, or just any interaction for that? Because sales also, before you're even in a business trying to build business, you could easily translate all of this to like high school trying to talk to a girl, trying to ask.
Very similar to dating.
Trying to date, trying
or
to
if
ask.
You're the one that's doing the prospect. It's very similar. Yeah.
So
now my kids, this didn't happen so much when I was growing up, but now girls are prospecting as much or more than the boys.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I that's an interesting one. At least that's what I've experienced in our family. But
okay.
That's a whole other day.
Okay.
But so, but I'll just kind of cut to the chase here.
Yeah.
A lot of high IQ people are working for the EQ people.
Okay.
Just to kind of give that perspective.
To lay it out, yeah.
If you see a large company, the EQ folks are the leaders.
Okay.
The IQ folks are the grinders. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people out there that have a high IQ and a high EQ, because there are, but that's back to very small percentage. So the EQ people hire the high IQ people because they know how to communicate, they know how to understand, they know how to lead, but they aren't the smartest person in the room, so they hire people. And they know that. They know they're hiring someone smarter than them, and they're totally okay with it. So someone with a high EQ has a very high self-awareness. They know what their strengths are, they know what they're okay at, and they know what they suck at, and they build their business around that. And they understand people, and they understand how people make decisions, and they can adapt, and they can just people feel comfortable with them. They can get more of the truth because they know it's not about getting them to do something they don't want to do. It's about fit. And so the best salespeople can depersonalize things, that if you reject me, it's not because you're better than me. It's not because I'm a bad person. It's because I'm better than you or you're a bad person. It's just not a good fit. And someone with a high emotional quotient understands that it's not worth it to have a bad fit.
Absolutely.
Because that will impact the personal.
And you mentioned self-awareness. I find that even I have to practice. Even today, one of the things I'm working on practicing with my EQ, if you will, my self-awareness, is how I speak. Not what you say, but more how you say it. Like, again, if you could use this in sales, or if you're trying to date. If you walk up to a really pretty girl, you might start talking like faster, and you don't even realize that you're talking faster, and then you're stumbling over your words, and you're talking like up here out of your head.
Yeah.
As opposed to like when you see in the movies, it's like, "Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm from Kansas City. How are you today?"
Right.
And that's like, you could have said the same thing both ways, but it's so different. And again,
Yeah.
like you said, it's this self-awareness. And you know, I don't know if I'll ever be perfect at this self-awareness with my voice and
Nobody
my
will.
tone, but at least enough to be aware that you have to take a deep breath. It's just, you know, it's just a girl,
the
or it's
voice and
just a
tone
sale.
needs to match their personality too, because if they're a little bit more of a dominant person, they probably want a little bit of a dominant person. Does that make sense? You know, so it's not just that there's this magical way that works for all the girls. There's different things that work with different girls. And so
Sales.
And of course you got to kind of know what kind of girl do you want, though, because why are we even talking to girls that you just know it's not going to go? It's not I mean, you can do whatever you want, but if you're looking for a long-term relationship, the more I talk to this girl who's not a good fit, I'm wasting time and eliminating the ability for me to talk to someone else.
Yeah.
So that's the way we look at sales, is every minute I spend with an unqualified prospect not only hurts them, it hurts me, and it robs me of the ability to talk to someone who does fit, because I can't talk to them when I'm talking to a bad fit. So
then you get people who coming into your sales system. Do you work with pretty much everyone? One of the things, the tenets they have to identify and work on is their EQ?
No.
Okay.
So what we do, anytime you try to make adults do things, whether they want to or not, it doesn't end well.
Okay.
So if someone wants to work on EQ, we'll work on it. But we are the adult learning model. So while they're coming in and they're getting exposed to different things, particularly in the beginning, well, not only in the beginning, it just changes. We are always working on what they think they need to work on.
Okay.
We're not issuing homework just to issue homework. Because these are adults.
But there is homework involved?
There is homework.
Okay.
But the homework is at the end of every session, first of all, they just say, what did I learn? You know, just to document that. But the most important part, which is the homework, is what am I going to start or stop doing? There has to be action behind the knowledge. So that's their homework.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to stop as soon as someone says, I'm not interested, saying, okay, thanks, goodbye. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to start asking one more question before I hang up. See the difference? So that there's something, you know, that I'm, you know, modifying my behavior. Because just having it in my head, you know, reading a book is great, but it's got to be applied.
Most definitely. Well, a lot of the folks who are in your program, they're not just in their 20s. Trying to bust out in a new sales
The
thing.
only time we get people in their 20s is with our corporate clients, where they, you know, in the beginning, they usually put in a few people, not everybody. And then once they get the results and they go, okay, everybody's doing this.
Okay.
So then anytime they hire someone, they roll them in. And so that's when we see people in their 20s. But beyond that,
but you got, yeah, and we mentioned earlier, like 30s, 40s, 50s. This isn't just like a young person's thing.
yeah, I've had people 73.
73.
72.
Can you tell us what industry or business they were trying to build in
both
that, out of curiosity?
scenarios. The one guy was a home real estate person, very established, and he was probably 67 at the time, but he was going to sell his business at some point. So he wanted to not only build it up in his peak earning years, so he's getting more now, but he also wanted to sell it for more. So that's why he joined us.
Okay.
And then another guy that was in his 70s had just sold his company to a bigger company. And now, for the first time, he had more time to sell. So he stayed on. He sold it, but he stayed on as a salesperson. And he didn't have all the responsibilities of running the company and doing payroll. And he goes, gosh, now's the time because I can do it full time now.
Yeah.
And so he stayed with us till he was like 74 years old.
Okay, now, so these guys were in their 70s or 60s. We were talking about you've written 2 books, and we were talking about those before we got started, this seems like a perfect segue. So when you wrote your books, they weren't necessarily meant for people who are fresh out of high school or college.
Yeah.
How do you describe the purpose behind the books that you wrote?
So the demographic typically starts at about late 30s, and it's about career significance rather than career success. Because in the 20s and 30s, keep in mind, if someone's 26, 10 years ago, they were a snot-nosed teenager that thought the whole world revolved around them.
Sure.
So they're still a little bit in that selfish mode. That's when we tend to get married and like, what's in it for me to get married? And then all of a sudden you realize it's not a good way for a long-term relationship. There's always what's in it for me. But that is what it is. So, so in the 20s, we're still more on that selfish side. So, but when you start to get into and then you start to have some success, and then you realize all these things that I thought were going to make me happy, the big house, the 4 kids, the dog, vacations, all the stuff that goes in the Christmas letters. Most people realize that that's really not making them happy. That's not continuing to make them happy. It's happy when it's happening, and then So what they start to realize in their late 30s, maybe 40s, up into 50, is that there's success and there's significance. And so significance is more about the impact that I'm having, and success is more about what am I getting. So people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s can still be acting like 16-year-olds, and the world still revolves around me, and it's all about me, and it's all about my bank account, it's all about my cars, it's all about my family, it's all about my business. And they're successful, but they're not really having the impact on others that they think they are. So you can be significant and not successful, or you can be significant and successful. Just because you're successful doesn't mean you're significant.
Sure.
So the books are a parable of 4 classmates that start out at age 38.
And what was the name of the first book? I'm going to pull it up while you're telling
Reunion.
me. The Reunion.
Yeah, The Reunion. And they're going back to their 20-year high school reunion. And whether people go to their reunions or not, and this isn't a judgment on that, they do take stock in their lives. It's like, wow, I've been out 20 years. And, am I where I thought I'd be? Or do I want to go to my class reunion, or do I not want to go to my class reunion? And why don't I want to go? Why do I want to go? And so that's when they're kind of asking those questions of themselves, regardless of whether they go. And then the book ends at age 48, and 2 of the characters took a chance and started doing what they felt they were meant to do, and significance, as opposed to just trying to accumulate more of what I already have. So when someone gets to be about 38, 45, 50, sometimes they're actually trapped by their success. Like, there's a lot of people at Sprint that are making good money, and they freaking hate it.
You've almost painted yourself into a professional corner where the operation, if you will, can't run without you, and you're just spread too thin.
Or they're like, God, I'm making 180. If I do what I really want to do, I won't make that. And you know what? We kind of like this lifestyle, and so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm trapped by the income I'm making. It's not freeing, it's trapped. So that's just kind of part of what success isn't always what it's meant or what it's cracked up to be. Significance is that I'm having an impact, and I'm impacting people's lives, and I'm being reimbursed somehow, some way for that. It doesn't have to be a tit for a tat.
And I'm sure you see that all the time. You might see a lot of people that say, I want to make more sales or more money or whatever it might be, but then you see as a side effect where maybe they come in and it's already happened, or they're building themselves in that direction of hey, and I don't, again, like, do you put on your psychologist, therapist hat and like, hey, I want you to keep in mind, it looks like you might be spreading yourself too thin. Are you happy?
I just make observations.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't try to ever really
I'm not equipped to do therapy, but I'm
Right.
equipped to get them far enough to get ready for therapy. Like I might say, okay, we've gone as far as we can go on this, Ryan. And if you really want help with this, if you don't know somebody, I know somebody. But if I take you any further, I'm crossing a line and not willing to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not
of course.
equipped to do that, but I can see that there's something there. Or, some people are trapped by their success and that they need to travel a lot to be able to maintain that type of lifestyle. And meanwhile, their kids are growing up and they're starting to leave and they're stuck. Like I'm missing stuff at home, but if I don't travel, or if I don't get promoted and move to these cities, and again, success is trapping them, and the kids don't want to go, and there's just all that kind of stuff that there's a yin and a yang, but the reality of it is there is the ability to have both, but you've got to stop. You got to break the pattern. And if I move every 2 to 3 years, that's a pattern. And so if I want something different, I need to break it.
So then does this whole concept lead into how you wrote the second book then?
Yeah, so then the second book goes in, now that starts at age 58, 40-year class reunion, ends at 68, but now we're starting to get in the significance of, the last, finishing strong in your career, but also what does significance mean when you're not working? And most women do a way better job at retiring than men. Like it's not even close.
Yeah, I don't think that's even a conversation, a debate.
But guys tie too much of their worth to what they do. And that's why they don't retire well. They might retire well financially. They don't retire well emotionally.
I know plenty of people, even my age, throughout my 20s, in the last, 7 years, 8 years since I finished university, I could name probably 2 to 3 who have at one point in their 20s come and said, they feel too tied that if they're not industrious, they don't have value, that type of thing. So it's not necessarily even, and I'm sure you know that, it's not even necessarily till when you wait until your 60s.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I do think millennials have a better view of career than people my age do. They're less likely to make some of those mistakes where they just give it their all for 35 years only to be let go or to get some weird ring or something. I mean, and
your golden watch on the way out the door.
But yet their family really suffered and they're struggling. That's the other reason sometimes dads don't do well emotionally is they frankly don't really have much of a relationship with their kids. And now their kids are like, we're basically doing to you what you did to us. We're busy. We got our own thing going.
I learned it from you, Dad.
Yeah, I learned it from you, Dad. Or the Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon.
Yeah, I never really understood that song, but I know what you're getting at.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what the book's about.
Okay. Let me see here. I've got a few more questions before we wrap this up. But before we do, are there any other? I can tell because I've studied the whole thing. The Sandler sales system is very unique and one of a kind. Are there any other hot points or any other things that you wanted to touch on or just mention that we didn't get to regarding how unique?
Well, we kind of touched on it, but I'll just say it again. It's not just using a method. It's working on attitudes, and all of us are struggling.
How you approach what sales really is.
And what I can't tell you how many times we're working with people and they'll just go, oh, I could never say that. Or I wouldn't like that if you said it to me. And the news flash is, at best, you represent a third of the population out there. So that's fine, you feel that way. And I get it, but what are you missing out on by not saying that, by not doing that, by not being firmer, by not being clear? Because a lot of them are just passive-aggressive people. They're real Midwest nice until the prospect does something they don't like, and then they get aggressive. You
say that, and that just sparked in my memory. I remember reading an article about 1.5 years ago where Kansas City, and who knows if it's even it's an opinion piece really, but Kansas City is suffering because we're too nice. We can't build the city as a huge business hub because the people of the Midwest are just too nice of people.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes I think it's because we don't know what we want. That's another part of it. And you got a state line, there's confusion. But you're right. I mean, it's just, we're not clear. We're wishy-washy, and we're just
you don't want to be
so
offensive.
nice. We don't really say what we want.
Yeah.
And, well, then you can't be upset with someone for not knowing.
Exactly.
Because you didn't tell them.
Yeah, that's again. I totally agree. Your mindset and your attitude on how sales and sales work. And at the end of the day, there have been days when I made a personal goal to make like 200 cold calls.
Wow.
And I think there's a program called Phone Burner, and you just upload it like an Excel sheet to it, and you dial into their cloud number.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Phone Burner?
Well, I'm familiar with something. It's Connect and Sell.
Okay, so
but it does all the dialing for you.
Yeah,
and
so
when it gets a live person, it comes on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so as soon as the phone hangs up,
200 doing it that way is a lot easier.
Yeah. So like, if somebody yells at you, you don't have to like force yourself to dial the next number. It's already dialing.
Yeah, it's just always going.
But yeah, at the worst, they say no, and you move on to the next. And again, you just get to improve. And it's a scientific method as well. You put the hypothesis on what your best sales pitch could be or how to approach it. You test it. And then you observe the results, and then you change it if need be, and just kind of test. And what's cool about what Sandler's doing is you, Dan, are there to walk people through and hold their hand if they get too nervous or if they feel like they're just not making progress. Just to get better.
Yeah, you don't graduate. Everybody goes, do you get a certificate or you get a graduate? No.
You just get better.
This isn't, first of all, commencement exercises, a lot of people are confused of what that word means. It means the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we just see it as continual. Now, you can stop anytime, but you don't graduate. You just get better.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you want to get better, keep coming. If you feel like you got it, you stop. But you don't graduate. You just get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a few questions I want to ask you. If Eric Greitens, the governor of Missouri, calls you up tomorrow and says, "Hey, Dan, I really like what you do. I'm going to give all the high school students graduating this spring a book," what would you say? What would you tell him to give every high school graduating?
I would suggest...
It could be a couple if you can't think of one.
No, one's good. I would suggest The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
And so
The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. They're the same principle, but if let's say someone goes, "I know who Jeff Olson is, but I know who Darren Hardy is," well, then it's the same principle, and it's that the little things do matter. You don't have to worry about them, but the little things you're doing and not doing do matter, particularly over time.
Mm-hmm.
And as an 18-year-old, that doesn't make as much sense, but if they could at least be more mindful of that, they could save a lot of heartache.
What's that? How does that quote go? Where your thoughts turn into your words turn into your actions, your actions turn into your lifestyle, something along those lines.
Another one,
I think there's another
5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
But it is the little things, and you're always fading. You're either fading up or you're fading down, and it's the little things that you're doing or not doing that is causing the fade.
Okay. So how about what's and I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be directed towards sales, but are there any really unique, awesome websites that you frequent quite often? Maybe undiscovered, not Facebook or LinkedIn, like.
I'm coming up with nothing on that one. I'm kind of, I've always been this way. I graduated with computer science degrees, which was not the right choice, but I got through it, and so I've always kind of seen the computer as just a work thing. Like I never play on it.
So
so not that that's playing, but it's sort of like just kind of messing around out there. I don't just mess around out there.
Okay. So then this might not be good to my lead into my next question.
Yeah,
how about any podcasts or YouTube channels that you love?
Well, what I listen to the most is I have a mindfulness app.
Okay.
That I am the most consistent with, and that's through it's called Vision Pursue. John McGraw, he's a former Chiefs player.
Oh, okay.
And that is my go-to every day.
So how does it work exactly?
Well, every day there's I listen to mindfulness anywhere from 8 to 20 minutes. It cycles through different things. It has like my 3 big intentions that I look at every day.
Okay.
Is on there, and then another thing that's on there is my vision board. It allows me to pull up pictures, so it just reminds me of what's important to me. It's mainly people. And then the third thing that's sometimes on there is just to just to remind me to expand just do the best where I am and not be so concerned about pining for stuff all the time.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, so
Don't
if I do
that.
the best at where I am, then I'll be drawing better things to me instead of pursuing things all the time. And so that's been helpful. And then the only other app that I am on every day is Jesus Calling. That's one of my favorite apps. There's a daily devotional, and then I get on the Holy Bible app every day. But those are the three things that I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Dan, hey, I'm really happy you stopped by. Sales,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sales is one of those topics that, again, the stereotype around sales and how it works is, probably for the rest of the time will be a negative stereotype. But what you're doing there at Sandler is, again, transforming people's attitudes about how you approach sales and how it doesn't have to be bad. Like I said, when you and I first met, the first few minutes, you completely lowered all of the fears or
Nothing's
withdrawal.
Nothing's going to happen.
Exactly.
You know what's going to happen, but nothing's.
How can people, if they want to get in touch with you or get in with you at the Sandler Sales, where can they find you and get in touch with you?
Just my phone number is 913-451-1760. My email is just dstalp@sandler.com, or I'm out on LinkedIn. I'm the only Dan Stalp out there. If you just want to search for, my last name's Stalp, and I'm the only Dan Stalp out there, and you can send me a connection or whatever. But yeah, those would be the best.
Okay, very cool. Well, hey everybody, thanks for listening. We've got I don't even have what's next week is. Who the heck is even on next week? It's
a surprise.
Yeah, I've got 4 people on next week. So next Tuesday is the next episode. So check it out. I'm not going to tell you who it is, though. So anyhow, Dan, again, I'm going to end this right now. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.